Welcome to the latest edition of Liberalism or Death, Republikon Institute's podcast. Today we have a very special English language edition with a very special guest, Ricardo Silvestere, political scientist and author, associate fellow of the European Liberal Forum, the think tank of the other party in the European Parliament. Ricardo, thank you very much for being with us today. We are going to talk about the United States and about the aftermath of the US elections. But before we get there, I have to tell you that Ricardo was our guest in Budapest at a conference that we held on the 7th of November. At the conference, we focused on the radical conservative movements on both sides of the Atlantic. We already had the results of the elections on the 7th of November, so we already knew that Donald Trump will have the chance to form his second cabinet in 2025. But several weeks have passed since, and I'm really curious, Ricardo, what your understanding is. How much have we learned since then about the potential expectations of a second Trump administration? Have we learned anything new? Have we learned anything that we hadn't known before? So what do we know about the potential plans of Donald Trump's second term? I know this question is very general, so I would probably narrow it down a bit. What is your impression based on Trump's nominees for cabinet positions and other high-ranking government positions? Does he have a clear policy approach to governance? Because, well, for an outsider who doesn't know as much about American politics as you do, it seems quite chaotic.
Well, thank you so much for having me first. It's awesome to be with my Hungarian friends from Republikon in Budapest. And as you mentioned, I was there in a very interesting and very lively conversation regarding the election. And at the time, we were still going through the shock of knowing that Trump was going to win the election, and also that there was a shift to Republican voting from part of the American electorate, which was quite surprising, and maybe we can get into that. But since then, first of all, it's no surprise for me, and I think for most of the people that follow politics in the United States in the Trump era, it's a chaos. It's a circus. His nominees are highly incompetent, and some of them are actually people that have backgrounds which should not put them in any position of power whatsoever. The promises that he made, and people at the time thought it was an exaggeration, that it was not going to happen, it was just him being blusterous, are going to happen. As we talk right now, you and I, he already said that he's going to impose tariffs in some of the major economic markets that relate to the United States. Now he's talking about just Canada and Canada and Mexico, but eventually will come to China and to the European Union. And naturally also they're putting everything in place to try to deport 5 million, 8 million, 10 million. As the number gets bigger and bigger, the chaos will also be bigger and bigger. But I want to pause here to say that there is a little bit of good news, and that is the majority on the Senate is quite comfortable. They're going to have like 5 to 6 votes, but the majority on the House. So for our listeners, the Capitol in the or the legislative branch in the United States have 2 chambers, have the House of Representatives and the Senate. And the House of Representatives, actually, as we record this, it may be that the majority for the Republicans could be like 2 votes or 3 votes, and that is going to be a major obstacle for the Trump administration, because all the craziness that they want to go through the House of Representatives, there's going to be a lot of members of the House that are Republicans, which are in districts that are mainly Democratic districts. Some of them, for example, in New York, others in California, others in Minnesota, others in Michigan. those people will have to think about their own political future. So I don't see the blindness of just everybody voting yes to anything that Trump says, unless they are so concerned that Elon Musk can put money behind a challenger in the elections in 2026, that they will blindly obey. But I don't think they will blindly obey. So that is something that we have to see. Now, maybe Zoltán, and you're leading the conversation. I have to refrain myself for acting as a podcast host, which I also have the podcast.
I know that's also within your repertoire. So
I have the podcast at the European Liberal Forum, which I invite your listeners to also check it out. But I have like 3 tracks that we can go to. So just tell me. You just said a minute ago that you wanted to close a little bit the aperture of the discussion. So which one do we want to go? Do you want to go to the problems of the European Union, the problems of the United States? Do you want to talk about the problems for Trump?
First, I think it's very important that you mentioned the House and the Senate and the rest of the Republican Party, because when I don't know about Portugal and I don't know about the rest of Europe, but I know that for sure that when in Hungary we are talking about the US elections, we tend to focus on the president's person himself. So we are talking mostly about Trump himself. But it is very important, as you mentioned, that there is a House and the Senate. And in the Senate, in both houses, the Republicans have a majority. But in the House, it's really a very narrow majority, and that might be a problem for the second Trump administration. But in general, I think it will be very interesting to talk a little about the state of the Republican Party itself after this Trump election, because I think this is something that, of course, has a direct effect on how Republican members of the House or of the Senate react to the ideas that are coming from the White House. And even if you look at the nominations actually that were made by Trump, probably one of the most outrageous ones was the nomination of Matt Gaetz for Attorney General. And eventually Gaetz, officially he was the one who withdrew from the nomination, who said that he didn't want to become AG. Of course, we don't know exactly what happened in the background of that decision.
We do know.
We do know.
It didn't have the votes in the Senate. That's obvious. There was some senators that clearly signaled that they wouldn't vote for him. But listen to our list.
Well, actually, it's great that you're saying this is exactly what I wanted to ask you about. So, is there still a line of sanity within the Republicans? To say that okay, Trump won the elections, Trump is leading the Republican Party at the moment. His ideas, his approach to politics seems to be dominant within the party, but still there are lines that we are not ready to cross.
Well, with Matt Gaetz, it was impossible to cross those lines. Matt Gaetz is actually right now under investigation by the FBI of paying for sex, of trafficking minors across state lines. So all this is just insane to even contemplate this man being the top law enforcer in the United States. There's a little bit this discussion that this was a test. I don't think so. I think Trump really wanted Matt Gaetz to be his attorney general because he's such a bootlicker, is such a fanatic. But Zoltán, my main concern is that actually 50% of the U.S. senators, Republican senators, were actually okay with this idea. But that is. I don't think we should waste any time with that. But it didn't get any better because Pat Bondi, which is now the candidate, and probably she's going to win the nomination. She's also absolutely corrupt. Actually, as she was the attorney general in Florida, it was known, it is documented, that she dropped an investigation on a Trump political foundation because Trump gave her $10,000 donation for her campaign. So this is the level of corruption. Again, this is the woman that may be the head of the law enforcement department, where she is corrupt to the point that she dropped an investigation because she got a donation. So that's the level where we are at now.
There's the famous Trumpian transactionalism, isn't it?
Oh yes, but let's continue with that, which is the sanity. How much the sanity can prevail. Some of the Republican senators are clearly going to play this game, which is we will vote for this. What ones were completely unfit, but they're not maniacs, but we'll not vote for this one. So let me give you an example of the nominee for Secretary of Defense, which is Pete Hegseth. This is another fanatic. This is another very dangerous, very unqualified, very problematic pick. Okay, he has ties with extremism. He has positions regarding military which are completely unacceptable. That, for example, goes from cutting benefits to veterans to not having women in combat. So this is completely insane. So some of those senators that already said no to Matt Gaetz, they may say no to Pete Hegseth, but they may have to say yes to, for example, RFK Jr. So Robert Kennedy Jr. So this is try to be the balance. Anyway, Zoltán, I'm going to just focus on these four because they're really important. Pete Hegseth, Tulsi Gabbard, RFK Jr. for health and safety department, which is just insane, and we can talk about that later on, and the pick for the Commerce Chamber. These four people in a regular world, they would be laughed out of the room. But let's just finish this point. The Republican senators will have to play this game, which is which one of these ones are not completely insane, and I will have to vote for them, because otherwise I will be in trouble with the Republican Party. If I vote no to this slate, if I vote no to all of them, like for example Pat Bondi, you just mentioned, then I'll get into trouble. So I will try to pretend to be sane and say no to this one and this one, but accept these ones which are completely a danger to the United States, which is the case, for example, of Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F.K. Jr. And we can go into detail of those two if you want to.
Yes, I think it would be certainly interesting, not to the very depth of the issue, but just a couple of words, if you can say, about why do you consider them to be such important threats to the U.S. I think that's definitely interesting to hear.
Well, Tulsi Gabbard is a Russian agent. Period. And I can say this openly. I know that it sounds too much of an exaggeration to say, but it is true. She's a Russian agent. She's a Kremlin friend. She parrots all kinds of Putin's talking points regarding Ukraine and regarding Europe. She also is a friend of Bashar al-Assad in Syria, which we know is another genocidal maniac. She is connected to extreme religious groups. The Moonies, they're the name. She's highly unqualified, but she may sail through. If Pete Hegseth, for example, if he's rejected, she may sail through. And this is just really bad news for Europe and bad news for the United States also. Now, and again, she's picked to be intelligence. She'll run the intelligence apparatus. Now, the other one is Robert Kennedy Jr., which is a kook. It's another completely insane person. She thinks that vaccines cause autism. She thinks that COVID was a bioweapon. She wants to take fluoride out of the water. Why is this important for us Europeans? Because we're going to have, and I said this in Budapest, you remember this, Zoldi, we're going to have a lot of sick people in the streets of Europe, Americans, blusterous and loud as they normally are, taking pictures to the Budapest parliament and just spreading all kinds of viruses in Europe. And, you know, we can survive this, and I'm sure we're going to survive. But again, going to the point that you're going to say about sanity, let's hope that there's a bunch of Republican senators that it's like, this is a bridge too far. This is a red line that we can't cross, which is to have maniacs taking care of very important parts of the US government.
Please help me understand this a bit more, or a bit better. If you're talking about people who you are saying and who really seem to be so unqualified to be in these very high-ranking government positions, do you think these people will be able to actually operate these huge administrative bodies? So, I mean, like for Pete Hegseth, for instance, of course, he is a veteran, but he doesn't really have much else to do with the military, as far as I know. He's a face from Fox.
Yes.
Probably that's why he was one of Trump's picks, because he likes to pick his nominees from primetime television.
Oh, yes.
But, you know, I also went to high school, and I still don't qualify as a minister of education. So probably if I were just put from my current position to the top of a ministry from one day to another, I mean, I would at least be a bit confused. So I'm really curious, what do you think? Will these people be able to manage these tasks, or is it going to cause an administrative disaster?
That is a great point. And it connects to that, which is these people are highly unqualified. They have no place in taking care of such gigantic departments as the Health and Human Service, or as the military department, or even, I just mentioned him a couple of minutes ago, like if you think like Scott Bessent taking care of the Treasury Secretary. So there's a way to solve this problem for Trump, which is to start firing civil servants. So that is quite obvious, explicit. It comes on what is called Project 2025. And there's this governmental mechanism that is called Schedule F. Now, I'm getting really nerdy, but it helps our listeners understand the level of insanity that we can get to. So
that's the necessary level of nerdiness too.
Yeah. So Schedule F was something that was passed on the previous Trump administration, and the President Biden on the first days revoked that law. Schedule F is a law that it'll pass again. I have no doubt about it. Where the president has the prerogative to change all the technical staff to political appointees. And he will select all the people that then will make sure that whatever laws, whatever directives, whatever decisions are made by this very unqualified people, which their only qualification is that they say yes to Trump on everything. And there are actually some of them truly MAGA fanatics. Scott Bertram is one of them that I'm thinking, for example, on the Internal Affairs Department. So these people will change the entire technocratic, bureaucratic system and just put yes people in there. Now, there is another layer of control, which is the courts. Then you can have, like, for example, let's say that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. says it's a federal law right now that water doesn't have fluoride anymore. You can take that to the courts and say this is clearly something that is not a competence of the secretary, or this is because it's harmful to society, whatever it is, the argument that will be made. And then it goes to the courts, all the way to the Supreme Court if you have to. So that can be done. But the thing is, that mechanism can take time, also can be overruled. So, for example, if he says it's a federal mandate right now and it starts tomorrow, then the entire sanitary department has to take fluoride out of the water. Okay, that also takes time. But going to the courts can take even more time than that. So that is just an example of a million of examples. Like, for example, Pete Hegseth says women are not allowed to be in the military anymore. That will be taken to court. So what is going to happen is that the government is going to be paralyzed with all these kinds of stupid things happening, and then the counter response, and then also internally some resistance to this kind of crazy ideas. So let me give you two quick examples. So let's say that Pam Bondi gets hold of the judicial department, the Justice Department, sorry, and she says, "Well, now we're going to start prosecuting Anthony Fauci and Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. Who knows?" Naturally, there's got to be a lot of resistance inside the Defense Department, not the Defense, sorry, the Justice Department, because they're like, "Are you crazy? Of course we're not going to do that. There's no way we can actually put together a criminal case or a civil case. There's no way that a judge of her peers is going to give credence to whatever craziness Trump says, because Trump can always say, well, Biden needs to be prosecuted because of withdrawal in Afghanistan." That's just insane. That is never going to happen. But again, it's going to be resources, it's going to be time, it's going to be money. And while this is happening, then you have real crooks and real criminals, or you have really insane people trying to pass really insane laws, doing all kinds of damage. So that's what is going to be the next 2 years, I'm quite sure.
Well, before we go on, first of all, I have to apologize to our listeners, because I just realized after I said it that I used the same line on going to high school doesn't qualify you to become a minister of education in another podcast of ours not long ago, but that was in Hungarian. So just for a change. Well, actually, I think it's very important that you're mentioning, because it means that there are some mistakes or political problems that are embedded in the Trump administration because of these personnel and because of those issues that they might pursue. But you know, a political mistake only becomes a political mistake if there is an opponent to take advantage of that mistake. And this takes us to our next topic, which I really wanted to discuss with you, which is the state of the Democrats. Because, you know, if the Democratic Party is in a state where it is today, it might probably not be the party that is able to take advantage of the mistakes of the Republicans. Correct me if I'm wrong, but since the elections, I've been trying to follow American commentators and political analysts who are talking about the reasons why the Democrats lost the elections. And what I see at the moment, although it hasn't been even a month since the election, so they still have probably a bit more, probably they still need a bit more time for grief and processing. But what I can see now is that there is quite a lot of confusion, and that I hear of very different and very often contradicting arguments for why Kamala Harris couldn't win these elections. And some say she was too woke, some say she wasn't woke enough, some say she didn't speak enough of the economy, some say she wasn't convincing enough when she was speaking about the economy. What my point is that I can't see one coherent narrative from the Democrats about what happened in the elections. I'm really curious where you see the Democrats to be at this point, and what might be the way out for that party from this low point, from the rock bottom.
Very good. Can we curse in this podcast?
Absolutely, you're welcome to curse.
Okay. The Democrats are pussies. Period. They're seriously, Zoltán, there's nothing more than I can say than that. They're pussies. They are so freaking cowards and afraid of their own shadows. That is actually quite embarrassing. So I'm not going to answer your question. I apologize, you being the host and such a generous host in having me. I'm not going to answer that question, but I'm going to go with something you said, which is, what is the future of the Democratic Party? I think there's a bunch of dinosaurs that really need to get the hell out of the way. Dick Durbin, for example, the Senate Majority Leader of the Judicial Committee, he's a complete loser. Is a waste of space. Chuck Schumer, he also not as strong and not as effective as he should. But there is hope for people listening to us understand U.S. politics and think that the Democratic Party is the party for the future. There's a bunch of new kids, girls and boys who are amazing, particularly in the House of Representatives. It's going to be hell for Republicans. And we already saw this in this last Congress. Every time that they would have like commissions about Hunter Biden and about impeaching Joe Biden and about the weaponization of the government, they were destroyed every single time. It was so schadenfreude to see, which is they were being hoisted by their own petards over and over and over. So I think there's a class of Democrats, and I'm going to put Jasmine Crockett on this one. I'm going to put AOC on this one. I'm going to put Goldman from New York on this one. I'm going to put Moskowitz from Florida on this one, which are going to take this 2 years to shine in a way, Zoltán, that is going to have the heat of 1,000 suns. They're going to have so much fun. What I would like to see, it's also in the Senate. I would like to see a batch of senators, and there's some good, interesting ones that also were elected. Kim from New Jersey is a good example. But Democrats need to learn how to play dirty. They've been the party of norms, of rules, of decorum for way too freaking long. They have to understand what is the adversary that they have politically on the other side of the aisle, which is people that have no scruples, they have no compunction, they have no morals. They will do whatever they have to do to have power. And the Democrats have to understand the danger of just being, the party of pussies. So I'm looking forward to see that response. Now, regarding at the higher level, which is, of course, candidates for president, it is quite upsetting to see women that are so qualified, like Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris, not having enough votes for men, particularly white men, to win an election. So maybe they will have to go through the route of, again, having a white, cis, heterosexual men running for president. And that takes us to Gavin Newsom in California. I'm sure Gavin Newsom will be the front runner for 2026. There will be no resistance because, again, as you said, the Democrat Party is afraid of their own shadow. So they could maybe go in other directions. And I would like them to see and go other directions. But it's going to be Gavin Newsom, and there's no question about it, in my opinion. Now, can Gavin Newsom then win 2028? It has to do with what you mentioned a minute ago, which is, the Democrats, they don't have a message. The Democrats, they don't deliver for people. That is all crap. Sorry, I said this in Budapest a couple of times already. That is crap. That is people just deluding themselves. Trump won the election not because of wokeness or because of, Democrats being weak on the economy. It's all crap. What happened was that the economy was one of the best of the world. Inflation was going down. Job had the highest number in 50 years. They're a labor party, so it's a party that is friend of labor. They had the abortion issue in their favor, okay? But the price of eggs were too high. So what happened is that there's this maximum, and Zoli, this is a conversation that we should have more times on the podcast, because this is also being seen in Europe. There is this saying that you will trade your freedom for security. It's a very well-known expression. Now what we're seeing is that people are trading democracy for the price of eggs. So when you have Trump saying price of eggs, and this price of eggs is just an example. You can pick up whatever you want to. I will solve this problem, but you have to give up on democracy. That is a very, very, very dangerous line. And I think whatever Kamala Harris said, whatever the Democrats said, it can compete to this idea that people are willing and able to give up democracy so that they can pay less for groceries, or they can pay less for gas, or they can pay less for energy. Let me be very specific right now. AfD in Germany is growing. Why? Because there's a subset of the German population that is complaining that, oh, we have to pay a lot for energies, and our factories are not producing as much, and the economy is cratering. Germany have the highest level of income in entire Europe. They have one of the best countries regarding not only income, but purchase power and quality of life. So what we're seeing in the United States and Europe, it's people are complaining that they have it so good. And that, again, this is another discussion. I understand that, but maybe I can challenge you to continue this conversation and maybe have other people joining us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it is scary, Zoli. It is scary that you have a bunch of young incel white kids in America and in Europe voting for fanatics like Trump, or, you know, I'm going to say his name, Orban in Hungary, or, you know, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, because they are so troubled. You know, I'm a young white boy that I don't have any means, and I don't have any opportunities, and girls don't like me, and I don't like gay people, and I don't like elites. And listen, dude, if you lived in Europe 50 years ago, you would be running up in the streets because you would have, you know, the Nazis chasing you down. So again, I don't want to go into too much into that, but this hysteria that, oh, the Democrats weren't able to deliver a cogent message about economy or about abortion, I think that we are missing the mark. What we're seeing is a radicalization of a subset of the voting bloc, which wants more and more and more, and wants to have lives that are shiny, that you can put on Instagram. And I think that's the major fight in the next years. And again, I apologize going in this tangent, but this is really bothering me, and as you probably noticed by my by my discourse right now.
Yes, you're not great at hiding your emotions. Well, I do think I completely agree with you. I do think that this is a very, very important topic to discuss. And here I promise you that we are going to get back to this as soon as we can, because I also agree that this is something that we should pursue in our discussions, and it should be much more central to political discourse in general. But I'm also very thankful that you mentioned Europe, because oh, yes,
let me just interrupt you, because sorry to interrupt you, because this is important. Remember when I said in Budapest that Europeans should get a little more tougher regarding what you have and what you can lose?
Yeah, absolutely.
I just talked with MEP Lucia Jahr from Renew Europe, from ALDE Party, and also from the European Labour Forum. I just talked with her actually in Brussels at her office. She was very generous in welcoming me to record a conversation, and this conversation is actually live right now. One of the ways that progressive Slovakia it's getting traction in Slovakia, it's because Slovaks are afraid that they may be taken out of the European Union. Could be just a perception, but just that perception is enough for people to be afraid of Fischio and his ruling party. And they may vote a liberal party because they want to be part of the European Union club. So this is the level that we have to explain people. This is what you're going to lose if you vote for these maniacs. And we're not doing that. Continue.
I completely agree, although I have, before we go on, I have to add that the Hungarian opposition was actually trying to convey messages like this before, that, you know, democracy is at stake. You have to actually vote for us because we might lose our EU membership. but still it wasn't a message strong enough for the majority of the voters. But this is not the road that we should go down today. But I'm really glad that you mentioned Europe, because actually this is what I really wanted to talk about before we wrap up our discussion today, is how prepared do you see Europe for the second Trump term? And actually, what does Europe have to prepare for? So what are going to be the main consequences of the second Trump presidency for Europe?
That is a fantastic point. Another conversation for 2 hours. So we have two things running at the same time. One is the institutional one. An institutional one I'm actually quite comfortable, and that is the European Commission, the European Union, and the European Parliament. They are led by either center coalitions, center-right, center-left coalitions, and these coalitions are going to be able to be resistant to whatever craziness comes from the United States. The European Council is a little different, and we can get it into detail. And then we have the European Commission with Ursula von der Leyen, and she's not going to be playing around. She's already clearly on the offensive to the second Trump administration. So that gives me a lot of comfort. But it relates to the European Council. My concern is how smart leaders of governments of member states, how smart are they to understand the dangers of being dependent on whatever erratic comes from Washington. So let me give you an example. So we have Orban, we have Fischio, we have Geert Wilders. Those are the three examples that I use more often. They have to go either through the Giorgia Meloni route, which is to be smart, or if they continue to be Putin friends and trying to be Trump friends, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. It's going to be really, really bad for them. Because I think the rest of Europe and the rest of the European Union, we understand that this is a moment of union. This is a moment of closing ranks to try to defend the European Union project against all this craziness that will come from Washington, from Moscow, and from Beijing. So let's personalize to Hungary. And you know I like to do this. Our listeners can go see the video that you have on the YouTube of Republikon, and you will see me do this very often. So let's talk about Hungary. Orban has to understand that he cannot continue this stupid game, which is trying to influence the European Union project to be friendly with Putin. That has to stop, because otherwise he's going to be so isolated from the rest of the European Union, or even more isolated, that it will get to be unsustainable for him. That is my belief. Let's see. Of course, time will tell. Because the other thing is that there's also Austria. We can have the good news that Austria would actually have a government that doesn't include FPO. So that kind of coalitions that Orban can make on the European Council are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Poland is clearly out. Czech Republic is clearly out. Fischio will have to moderate itself because, against, like I said, progressive Slovakia is eating his lunch. Germany in this election, CDU, and is going to win the election, and then they will have to make some kind of center coalition to take AfD out of the picture. So Orban will start getting even more and more isolated. And then there's a new card on the table, which is a Portuguese card, which is the president of the European Council, which is Antonio Costa. He will be very good in moderating people like Orban. He has that capability. So when this relates to Europe, in particular on the sphere of Europe, and I'm thinking about Georgia, I'm thinking about Ukraine, I'm thinking about Moldova, also in Romania. So I think there will be a wake-up call where Europe will understand that they have to really work together in a consensus kind of way to maintain the integrity of the project. And I don't think Orban itself or FISU itself will be able to have the enough power to try to, you know, backslide us into again going into the direction that the two group in the European Parliament want to have, which is this union of sovereign nations. That is not going to fly. My analysis and my hope. Let's see if the next 2 to 3 years will show us that. Will show us that.
I really, really try to share your optimism, and actually, there are many people who say, I really try to agree that Europe usually, the EU usually grows under pressure. So when there is an international setting where it has to show unity and where there has to be the closing of the ranks, as you said, and then that's an opportunity for the EU to show that it's ready to take up the challenge.
Just give me 30 seconds, because this closing of the ranks will come from Ursula von der Leyen and Antonio Costa. And those are two heavyweights. And with the European Parliament, again, being able to fend off the radical conservatives. So again, the Patriots for Europe and the Union of Sovereign Nations, by fending those off, and we just had actually an agreement between the Social Democrats, the Populists and Democrats, and the Liberals. The Greens are a little bit of wild card, but we already see IRC, the Reformists and Conservatives, which have Fratelli d'Italia, Meloni, and also have PiS from Poland, understanding that they have to moderate a little bit. Of course, immigration is a big issue, and we know that. So the pressures will come from there, Zoltán, which will come from the top down. Because again, when you think locally, let's talk about Hungary again. Hungary will not have the power that they had 2 years ago. I'm quite sure that is going to happen. And if extreme measures will have to be taken, like, for example, conditionality mechanisms, or withdrawing EU funds, or isolating Orban in a way that maybe Article 7 will be invoked. This time we will do it. This time we will do it, because the danger is way too big for Europe to be tentative and try to, you know, negotiate like we do so much with Orban, trying to cajole and then, we'll give you this and you will give us. That part is over. We're not going to spend any more time doing that, because we really have to be secure and have strength, and then try to push as much as we can to some kind of strategic autonomy regarding energy, regarding the military, and regarding economics. That will come later. I understand that. But right now, it's just going to be like, either you're with us or you're out of the boat. I have no doubt that's going to be the main thinking coming out of Brussels in the next 2 years.
Okay, there is one question that I cannot let you go before asking. And that question is about the war in Ukraine, because I think this has been especially important, well, for everyone globally, but probably for our Hungarian listeners, as the war is in our direct neighborhood, it's particularly important and interesting. Do you agree that a Trump presidency would bring a quick end to the war?
Well, yes, if Zelensky will give Putin what he wants. There's two positive signs. One has to do with the special envoy from the United States to Ukraine. And this is very important, Zoltán, what we're going to discuss now. And I think Republikon should also keep an eye on this for the Hungarian, for the people that follow you in Hungarian. Trump picked Keith Kellogg to special envoy to Ukraine. This is very important. Keith Kellogg is a pro-Ukrainian politician. He was actually, he's a retired U.S. Army lieutenant general, and he went to Ukraine many times to give support to Ukraine against Russia. And adding to that, you have Marco Rubio as the Secretary of State, which is also an anti-Russia, anti-Putin politician. So again, Zoltán, this is such a chaos going on that it's hard to see a through line, because logic dictates that that Trump will want to please Putin. And maybe Putin has something on Trump that makes him being such such a fanboy. Trump is such a fanboy of Putin. But on the other hand, it's like Kellogg and Marco Rubio were not the people that we're waiting for to have regarding Ukraine, because this is actually pro-Ukrainian defense, pro-Ukrainian independence politicians. You were going to say something.
Be careful what you're saying, because actually you are now very much disappointing the Hungarian government. We have been hearing almost every day since Trump won the elections that one of the best results of this election, one of the best outcomes from this election, is that Trump is going to stop the war as quickly as possible, and finally, the government waited with the submission of the 2025 budget to the Hungarian National Assembly until the results of the U.S. elections came out. Actually, they had they already had the budget drafted before, but they didn't submit it until the elections, because they said that this is a so-called peace budget, because the whole budget is about Trump bringing peace to Ukraine finally. Ricardo, thank you very much for having been with us today. I think this was a wonderful conversation with really, really important insights into US politics and what Europe can expect from a second Trump administration. It has been a pleasure, as always, to talk to you. And I really hope that in the very near future, we'll have the opportunity to get back to the topics that you brought up, because really there were many things that you mentioned that are worthy of much, much, much further conversation. Thank you again. And we wish you all the best to Portugal.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's always such a pleasure to talk again with my friends at Republikon, and I commend the work you do. It's a tremendous job that you guys do in Hungary and with the European Liberal Forum family, but also to you and to my dear friend Andrea Virag, which are amazing people. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.